have been married to my husband for 30 years, and I have borne him 5 sons and 5 daughters. While the world envies my husband for his large family and the blessings it brings, he clutched my wrist tightly before he died. My lady, you give birth to children in litters like a rabbit. Yet your half-sister has not had a single child. Every time I see her shedding tears as she looks at our children, my heart is torn apart. If there is a next life, please let your younger half-sister's embroidered ball strike me. I wish to give her a child. I nodded through my tears. Very well. I shall grant your wish. Main text. The crowd beneath the embroidery pavilion was bustling, yet I spotted the youth in the faded blue robe at a glance. In my past life, it was that very glance that made my heart pound like a drum. And blushing, I tossed the embroidered ball to him. He caught it with a smile, and after our marriage, we treated each other with the utmost respect. He managed the outside affairs. I managed the household. We worked in perfect harmony and never once argued. Until, on his deathbed, he clasped my hand tightly. My lady, if there is a next life, I beg you to give the position of Lady Pei to your half-sister, Qin Shue. Only then did I understand. It was precisely because there was no love that our relationship had become nothing more than polite respect. In this new life, I will grant his unfulfilled wish. My half-sister nudged my arm and said with a touch of bitterness, Big sister, the Pei scholar father picked out for you is right over there. The servants are all waiting. Hurry up and toss it. I guarantee no one will snatch him away. Downstairs. Several burly men had already quietly surrounded the young man. I clenched the embroidered ball, my gaze flicking over him, and gave a self-deprecating smile. If you like him, little sister, they'll give him to you. My half-sister was overjoyed. Thank you, big sister, for being so generous. Then I won't stand on ceremony. Fearing I might change my mind, she immediately tossed the pink embroidered ball adorned with pure white jasmine flowers into the air. The ball soared over the crowd's heads and, amid a chorus of gasps, landed steadily in the young man's arms. Pei Wenyuan looked up, his gaze sweeping past the crowd, only to meet my younger half-sister's intense stare. He furrowed his brow slightly, a complex expression flashing across his eyes. I was taken aback. Wasn't my younger half-sister the moonlight he had been longing for? Now that his wish had come true, why did he seem reluctant? The Liu family servants, unaware of the situation, saw him holding the embroidered ball and immediately escorted him up to the pavilion with great deference. Pei Wenyuan came to a stop and bowed politely to me and my half-sister. This humble scholar greets you both. Young ladies, my half-sister, overjoyed, slipped her arm through his. Pei Lang, there's no need to be so formal. We'll be family very soon. Pei Wenyuan visibly stiffened. His fingers curled slightly, but he did not withdraw his arm. My younger sister turned to urge me. Eldest sister, you must throw yours too. Don't let us miss the auspicious hour. She pointed to a young man in brocade robes downstairs and said, Look, that's the husband father chose for Meth, young master of Zuichuan Pavilion. Though he can't match Pei Lang's talents and learning, his family is wealthy. And he's generous and kind. You can't go wrong by tossing it to him. That man was my half-sister's husband in her past life. Though he held no official rank, he loved her with all his heart. Unfortunately, my half-sister thought he lacked ambition, and they argued constantly. Later, he chose to sleep in the study rather than touch her, which led to her remaining childless for the rest of her life. She would often weep over my children. He is a man worthy of entrusting one's life to. But I refuse to play this game of swapping husbands. The man I intend to marry is someone else entirely. The people downstairs, seeing me clutching the embroidered ball and hesitating to move, began to grow impatient. Miss Liu, do you look down on us? We may not be as talented as young Master Pei, but we are still among the finest in the capital. No matter how wealthy your family is, you're still just a merchant family. Don't get too high and mighty. My younger half-sister whispered a reminder. Sister, you aren't going to back out, are you? Everyone is watching. It was my Pei Lang who caught my embroidered ball. I shot her a glance. Don't worry, little sister. I have no interest in your Pei. With that, I took a deep breath and threw the embroidered ball with all my might toward the dark figure mounted on a tall, majestic horse. The man looked down at the bright red peony-patterned ball in his arms, his gaze heavy as it settled on me. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. I pressed my hand to my pounding chest. Would he agree to marry me? My half-sister got a clear look at the man's face and, unwilling to accept it, clenched her handkerchief tightly. Big sister is so lucky she actually hit the renowned Regent Prince Guyanzhou. Those words stirred an inexplicable irritation in Pei Wenyuan, and a slanderous remark slipped from his lips. Miss Liu, though the Regent Prince holds a high rank, he was gravely wounded on the battlefield. Moreover, his former fiancée met a tragic end. Fear he might be. I cut him off sharply. Young Master Pei, speaking ill of others behind their backs is hardly the conduct of a gentleman, is it? Pei Wenyuan's face went pale in an instant. I spoke out of turn. As we spoke, Guyanzhou had already gone upstairs with Chen Tao. His gaze locked onto me with piercing intensity. And he spoke bluntly. Miss Liu, do you truly intend to marry this prince? I lowered my gaze slightly, too guilty to meet his eyes. Since the embroidered ball was thrown, whoever it hit is the one you can't back out now. He suddenly took a step closer, his towering frame leaning down, his handsome features suddenly looming before my eyes. My heart pounded violently against my chest, nearly leaping out. He was known as the living king of hell. He had merely happened to be passing by on official business today. Yet for some inexplicable reason, he was struck by the embroidered ball. Surely he wouldn't blame me for scheming against him. Very well. Since you chose this prince of your own accord, don't come to regret it later. Before his words had even finished, he had already turned sharply and strode down the stairs, leaving. Watching his upright figure grow smaller and smaller in the distance, my taut nerves finally relaxed slightly. My half-sister had thought that snatching Pei Wenyuan away would keep me down for the rest of my life. But little did she know that the one I'd thrown the ball at was none other than the Regent Prince, the most powerful man in the realm. The joy I'd felt earlier at the prospect of marrying Pei Wenyuan instantly turned into nothing but jealousy and hatred. Sister, the Regent Prince may be childless and a widowmaker, but a family of his stature is far beyond what a merchant family like ours could ever hope to match. Even if the Regent Prince agreed, there's no way we could ever get past his mother. She paused, feigning concern. If you ask me, you'd better take your time choosing from the men downstairs. You don't want to end up failing to marry the Regent Prince and missing out on other talented suitors. I shot her a cold glance. Little sister, you'd better mind your own business. You needn't concern yourself with my marriage. Upon returning home, Mother heard that I had chosen the Regent Prince over Pei Wenyuan and immediately wore a look of deep worry. My daughter, Pei Wenyuan was the son-in-law your father handpicked after much deliberation. How could you have let him go to Lu Zhenxue? The Regent Prince's lineage and scholarship are, of course, exemplary, but he is bloodthirsty, a widowmaker, and childish is simply not a suitable husband. I gently patted her hand to comfort her. Mother, the Regent Prince fights on the battlefield to defend our country. How could he possibly be a bad person? He's simply in a high position and has drawn the envy of others, which is why he's been smeared with so much mud. My mother remained skeptical, but even if he is a good man, his condition, I'm afraid he won't be able to bring you happiness. Without an heir to rely on, how will you manage in the future? Mother, he merely has difficulty conceiving. He is not infertile. I have always been fertile, so I am certain I can bear him a child. In my previous life, after Gu Yan's death, because he had no heir to inherit the family estate, the fortune he had spent most of his life amassing fell entirely into the hands of his scheming cousin. In this life, I will never let that happen again. The next day, both the Gu and Pei families came to propose marriage at the same time. Pei Wenyuan and his mother arrived with a matchmaker and betrothal gifts, while the Gu family sent only a steward, my half-sister and her mother, Lady Lin. had originally been jealous that I had secured such a good marriage into the Gu family. But now that they've seen this, they can barely contain their smirks. Sister, Lady Gu really doesn't approve of this match. Aw, don't be too disheartened, even if you can't marry into a high-ranking family. With your talent and beauty, you'd be more than capable of becoming the legitimate wife of a wealthy merchant. Concubine Lin chimed in. Miss, let me give you some advice. Don't be too picky in the future. Settle for what's good enough. As a woman gets older, it becomes even harder to find a good match. She covered her mouth and chuckled softly. Still, I must thank you for yesterday for giving up this excellent match with the Pei family for my younger sister, Jin Xue. Before she had finished speaking, Pei Wenyuan's body swayed slightly, and he looked at me like a wounded little beast. That expression only made me feel even more repulsed. In my previous life, he begged me on his deathbed to grant him and his half-sister their wish. Now that his wish has been granted, who is he trying to play the victim for? Even if he's forgotten the past, if he truly has no desire for this now, he need only call off the engagement. Why must he adopt this posture of bearing humiliation, as if I were the one who owes him something? I averted my gaze, idly running my fingertips along the hem of my sleeve. My voice was quiet but laced with coldness. Concubine Lin, I am the mistress of this household. You are merely a concubine. Who gave you the right to lecture me? If you continue to overstep your bounds like this, they'll invite a former palace matron tomorrow to teach you proper etiquette. Concubine Lin's face stiffened. She twisted her handkerchief and took a half-step back. My half-sister hurriedly changed the subject. Don't be angry, elder sister. It was Concubine Lin and I who spoke out of turn. As she spoke, she shoved the Pei family's crimson gift list into my hands. You've been helping Mother manage the household for all these years. What precious items haven't you seen? Would you mind taking a look? I shoved the list right back into her hands. You're about to become the mistress of the Pei household. You should learn to handle these matters yourself. At the words mistress of the Pei household, my half-sister's eyes and brows instantly lit up with joy, and she exclaimed, Sister, you're absolutely right. She eagerly unfolded the list to examine it closely. However, after just a few glances, the smile on her face froze. Pointing at the list, she exclaimed in disbelief, Pei Lang, this betrothal gift is far too meager. I am, after all, the legitimate wife. Pei Wenyuan, having his predicament exposed in public, instantly blushed crimson with shame, wishing he could find a crack in the ground to crawl into. Seeing her son humiliated and hearing her half-sister so openly disparage their dowry, Pei's mother's expression darkened, and she snapped, Lu Zhenxue, don't be so ungrateful. My son is a distinguished Jiren, a future chancellor in the making. You, a concubine-born daughter of a merchant family, are lucky to have secured this marriage. It's a blessing earned by 8 generations of your ancestors' virtue. She spat contemptuously on the ground. Humph. I'll tell you the truth. Yesterday, my son was actually after the eldest Miss Embroidered Ball. Who would have thought that, by some twist of fate, he'd end up catching yours? Such a jinx. My younger half-sister's chest ached with anger at Lady Pei's words. Eldest sister, did you know all along that Pei Lang had such a harsh and unreasonable mother, and deliberately gave him up to me? My eyes darkened. If you truly dislike this marriage, I will call it off for you. You are free to seek a better match. Though my younger half-sister possessed a pure and charming appearance, given her status as the daughter of a merchant, being able to marry a Jiren as his legitimate wife was already a rare stroke of fortune. How could she possibly bear to let him go? Her earlier complaints were nothing more than resentment and a momentary outburst of emotion. Elder sister, I'm sorry. I was just speaking nonsense in the heat of the moment. She hurriedly grabbed my sleeve, her voice tinged with urgency and flattery. I fell for Mr. Pei at first sight. I've decided he's the one for me this lifetime. My younger half-sister's words cleared up the doubts in my mind. No wonder, in my previous life, She used to come running to my mansion so often after she got married. Back then, I simply thought it was deep sisterly affection. But now I realize she must have been deeply in love with Pei Wenyuan all along. And what of Pei Wenyuan? With the full support of my family and the Liu clan, his career has flourished, and he has no worries at home. Yet he has taken a fancy to his pitiful, childless sister-in-law. I cast a cold glance at her. Since you chose this marriage yourself, whether it turns out for better or worse, you have no one but yourself to blame. My half-sister nodded obediently. You are quite right, elder sister. Her eyes darted about, and she casually changed the subject. By the way, Steward Gu has been waiting in the flower hall for so long. Has he come to call off the engagement on behalf of the regent's house? The steward of the Gu household paid no heed to my half-sister's question, but turned instead to my parents and me, bowing respectfully. Master Liu, Lady Liu, and Miss Liu, I have come on behalf of my lady to offer our household's apologies. At these words, a fleeting glimpse of smugness and schadenfreude flashed across my younger half-sister's eyes, but the steward's next words struck her like a slap in the face. Yesterday, upon hearing that our prince had received the embroidered ball from the eldest miss, the old madam was overcome with joy and accidentally stumbled. As soon as the prince returns from court, he will personally bring the betrothal gifts and the matchmaker to propose marriage, observing all proper etiquette. Hearing this, my parents were both moved and worried. Is the old lady seriously injured? Please rest assured, master and mistress, the old lady is unharmed. The steward hurried to reassure them. Only then did my parents and I breathe a sigh of relief. Just then, a servant rushed in to report. I have news for master, mistress, and the eldest young lady. The regent prince has personally arrived with his entourage to present the betrothal gifts. My parents and I hurried out to greet them. Outside the mansion gates, rows of red lacquered, gold-embellished betrothal chests stretched as far as the eye could see, gleaming in the sunlight. The sheer scale of the display was jaw-dropping. My half-sister and concubine Lin stood at the back of the crowd, gazing at the endless procession of chests, their eyes red with envy. My half-sister tugged at concubine Lin's sleeve in frustration. Concubine, you must make sure my dowry is generous. We absolutely cannot let others look down on us. Aunt Lin wrung the handkerchief in her hand tightly. Don't worry. You and the eldest young lady are both master's daughters. He must treat you both equally. Gu Yan's towering figure cast a shadow over me as he handed me a crimson gift list embossed with gold. If anything is lacking, or if there is anything else you desire, just let me know. I took the heavy list and shook my head gently. Your Highness' generosity far exceeds what is customary. There is no need for anything more. Even though my parents were seasoned in the ways of the world, they couldn't help but feel a bit stiff in the presence of this regent prince, whose power spanned the court and the realm. My father hurriedly said, Your Highness, please come inside for some tea. Gu Yanzhou gave a slight nod. Father-in-law and mother-in-law, please do not stand on ceremony. The 8th day of next month is an auspicious date. I intend to wed your daughter on that day. I wonder what you two think. Very well, very well. We leave it entirely to your Highness' discretion. My parents agreed in unison, clearly flattered and a bit overwhelmed. His half-sister, her eyes red, tugged at Pei Wenyuan's sleeve. Pei Lang, let's set our wedding date for that day too. If I marry alongside my elder sister, it'll make the mansion a livelier place. Pei Wenyuan looked at the courtyard filled with betrothal gifts, then thought of his own gift list, which had been deemed meager. His face burned with embarrassment. He truly did not wish to humiliate himself on the same day. But when he met his younger half-sister's tearful, pitiful gaze, his heart softened. He whispered, All right, as you wish. With the wedding date set, my parents spared no effort in preparing my dowry, striving to match the lavish gifts from the regent's mansion. Perhaps it was the lingering fear from the fate of Gu Yan's his former fiancée that kept me confined to my quarters these past days, rarely stepping out and almost completely shunning visitors. On the eve of the wedding, my maid Chen Tao helped me with my ablutions and then withdrew to the outer room to rest and keep watch. I fell into a deep sleep, but in that twilight between sleep and wakefulness, I was startled awake by the faintest of sounds coming from the window lattice. My heart clenched suddenly, and my fingertips darted beneath the pillow to grasp the dagger, steeped in a potent poison. Yet before I could make a move, several sharp, metallic clangs rang out from outside the window. Immediately afterward came a series of piercing screams. "Miss!" Chen Tao cried out in alarm, rushing in with the night duty matrons and frantically lighting the candles. In the flickering candlelight, Gu Yan's towering figure stepped inside, his robe stained with dark red blood. I hurriedly threw on my robe and stood up, my gaze sweeping over the bloodstains on him. My heart sank. "Are you hurt?" But he looked first at my hand, which was tightly gripping the dagger, a fleeting hint of approval passing through his eyes. "It's nothing. It's not mine." His gaze returned to my face. "Lu Qingtang, do you see? If you marry me, dangers like this could happen at any moment. Are you afraid? If you regret this now and no longer wish to marry me, I will call off the engagement immediately, without tarnishing your reputation in the slightest. To say I wasn't afraid would be a lie. I am merely a woman raised in seclusion. How could I not fear the sight of flashing blades? But when I thought of the man standing before me, a man of integrity who stands tall for his country and its people, my fear was overshadowed by a deeper sense of attraction. I met his deep gaze and said, word by word, "Gu Yanzhou, I will marry you." He raised his hand, and the pads of his fingers roughened by callously gently brushed the top of my head. The movement was unusually tender, yet his tone carried an unyielding authority. "Very well. I've given you your chance. From this day forward, you are my wife." Gu Yan's hiss. He suddenly leaned in close, his scorching breath instantly washing over my sensitive earlobe, sending a shiver through me. "I won't let you leave again." That deep voice was like a hook. I felt one side of my face flush, my heart pounding like a drum. My voice was slightly hoarse, yet just as firm. "Yes, I won't leave you." My fingertips unconsciously clenched his shirt collar, and the question that had lingered in my heart for so long finally slipped out. "Gu Yanzhou, tell Mice your former fiancé really dead?" He lowered his gaze and shook his head gently. "No. At the last possible moment, I saved her, but she was terrified. She wanted to call off the engagement but dared not defy her family's orders. So I arranged a new identity for her and sent her away safely, to the outside world. I simply announced that she had tragically passed away. So that was the truth. To protect a woman, he had willingly taken on the infamous reputation of being a husband who brings misfortune to his wife. Bearing the misunderstandings and cold stares all these years, the world called him cold-blooded and heartless. Yet no one knew the tenderness and kindness hidden deep within him. The next day, the wedding arrived as scheduled, before the auspicious hour of my departure. My half-sister and I paid our respects to our parents in the main hall. My half-sister looked at the dazzling phoenix crown and bridal robes I wore, a masterpiece crafted over a year by 8 master embroiderers, and her eyes grew redder and redder. Finally, unable to hold back, she asked through her tears, "Father, I am your daughter too. Why do you show such favoritism toward her?" Father slammed his palm down hard on the table. "You wretch! Since ancient times, there has been a distinction between legitimate and illegitimate daughters. How dare you compare yourself to the legitimate daughter? The dowry I have prepared for you far exceeds what is appropriate for your status. It is more than sufficient and respectable. Furthermore, your sister is marrying the regent prince of the current dynasty. How could a mere provincial scholar compare?" Rebuked in front of everyone, the younger half-sister's face turned pale and flushed. "Very well. Merchants truly do value profit above all. Father, since you treat me this way today, I hope you won't regret it in the future. The imperial examinations are in 3 months, and my husband Tobe, Pei Lang, is certain to take first place. When that time comes, you'd best not come crawling to curry favor." Father was so enraged by his younger sister's words that he coughed repeatedly. Were it not for her impending marriage, he would have punished her severely according to family law. Mother hurried to pat Father's back to help him catch his breath, then shot a cold glare at the matron standing nearby. Concubine Lin has failed in her duty to raise her daughter, resulting in the second young lady's disgraceful behavior and disrespect toward her elders. Take her to the ancestral hall immediately to kneel in punishment. Copy the family rules 20 times, and reflect on her wrongdoing. Concubine Lin fell to her knees with a thud, tears and snot streaming down her face. I beg you, madam, to show mercy. Today is the second young lady's wedding day. Please allow me to see her off. Father waved his hand in uncontrollable rage. Look at the fine daughter you've raised. What sort of behavior is this? Guards, drag her away. My half-sister watched helplessly as her birth mother was forcibly dragged away. Tears streamed down her face, and she bit her lips until they turned white. Yet she dared not utter a single sound. Her eyes filled only with resentment and bitterness. When the auspicious hour arrived, Father solemnly placed my hand into Guyan's hiss. My mother turned her face away, clutching her handkerchief tightly, afraid that her tears might shatter the joyous atmosphere filling the hall. Guyanzhou bowed deeply to my parents, father-in-law and mother-in-law. Rest assured, as long as Tanger is by my side, she will never suffer the slightest injustice. My parents' voices choked with emotion, and they could only repeat this one word. Good, good. I took Guyan's hand and stepped onto the red carpet, entering the 8-man wedding palanquin. The moment the beaded curtain fell, I caught a glimpse of Lu Zhenxue still staring intently at this extraordinarily luxurious palanquin. Paying no heed to Pei Wenyuan's repeated urging, her dowry of 128 trunks was certainly respectable, but compared to my 10-ma-long procession of red trunks, it ultimately fell short. The veins on the back of Pei Wenyuan's hand, where he clenched the red silk, bulged. He was now filled with bitter regret. Had he known that day when the embroidered ball was thrown at him, he should have tossed it aside like a hot potato. Yet, driven by greed for the Lu family's wealth, he had accepted it. But there is no such thing as a remedy for regret in this world. He had no choice but to grit his teeth and go through with the marriage. My wife, he ground out through clenched teeth, forcing a gentle tone. It is time to board the palanquin. Lu Zhenxue suddenly grabbed his sleeve, her lacquered nails digging almost into the brocade. Pei Lang, rest assured, I will use my dowry to pave a path to the highest ranks for you. Pei Wenyuan's heart leapt with joy. As a scholar from a humble background, marrying the illegitimate daughter of a merchant was precisely what he had hoped for, this very boost to his career. He wrapped his arms around Lu Zhenxue's slender waist with genuine affection. With a wife like you, what more could a husband ask for? Today you help me rise to the top. One day I will surely secure for you the title of first-rank lady, bringing you boundless glory. Inside the crimson bridal chamber, I sat upright on the wedding quilt strewn with red dates and peanuts, my fingertips unconsciously twisting the hem of my gown. My heart felt as though a rabbit were nestled within my chest, pounding nervously. Guyanzhou had been injured there before. I wonder how well he's recovered. Just as my mind was wandering, my body suddenly felt Lithe had already scooped me up in his arms and set me gently on the soft bed. His handsome face drew near in the candlelight, his voice low and soothing. Don't be afraid, my wife, though be careful not to use too much strength. My heart, which had been hanging in my throat, finally settled. Thank goodness it works. I mustered my courage, wrapped my arms around his neck, and buried my face in the crook of his shoulder. I can handle it. When I rose the next morning, the waves of soreness radiating from my lower back made me gasp inwardly. Last night I really shouldn't have so easily provoked a man who was just discovering his desires and was in the prime of his life. Still, that sensation was like drinking the finest, most mellow wine. It left me craving more. My body and soul filled to the brim. My lady, it's time to present tea to mother. Guyanzhou was already dressed and looking refreshed, his gaze toward me carrying an even more intense, possessive heat than yesterday's. I forced myself to rise despite the ache in my lower back, naturally slipping my arm through his, and we walked together to my mother-in-law's courtyard. My mother-in-law, having been through it all herself, cast a single glance at our clasped hands and my slightly weary eyes, and a knowing, comforting smile spread across her face. She beckoned me closer with a loving gesture. Tanger, come here. She slipped a jade bracelet warm to the touch, with a rich, lustrous sheen from her wrist, and solemnly placed it on mine. This is a Gu family heirloom, a bracelet reserved only for the eldest legitimate daughter-in-law. I now entrust it to you. Then she instructed, bring over the matching tokens, keys, and ledgers. I was somewhat overwhelmed by the honor. I had long heard that relationships between mothers-in-law and daughters-in-law in prominent families were often fraught with conflict, and that mothers-in-law typically clung tightly to control over the household finances, refusing to relinquish it. In my previous life with the Pei family, Lady Pei had caused all sorts of trouble precisely over this authority to manage the household. I hurriedly declined. Mother, I've only just joined the family and am unfamiliar with everything. Perhaps you should handle it for now. My mother-in-law smiled and, without waiting for a reply, pressed the heavy bunch of keys into my palm. Silly girl. I've heard all about your capabilities. You've traveled far and wide with your parents since childhood, seen the world, and managed a vast estate back at your parents' home. Now that you're here with us, there's no need to be so polite with me, unable to refuse. I had no choice but to accept this heavy burden of stewardship, a symbol of both responsibility and trust. On the day of the third-day visit, Gu Yanzhou and I returned to the Lu mansion bearing carefully prepared lavish gifts. As soon as we entered, however, we saw that my half-sister and Pei Wenyuan had already arrived. My half-sister greeted us with a radiant smile. Eldest sister, I went all the way to the east side of the city to buy your favorite osmanthus cakes for you. They're still warm. I motioned for Chun Tao to accept them. After all, there's no such thing as a free lunch. Sure enough, she changed the subject and affectionately linked her arm through mine. By the way, eldest sister, I hear you're quite close with the daughter of Grand Tutor Wang. Would you be so kind as to introduce my husband, Pei Lang, to Grand Tutor Wang? If he could receive a few words of guidance from the Grand Tutor, Pei Lang's writing would surely reach new heights. I sneered inwardly, immediately seeing through her scheme. In my previous life, I had used my friendship with the Grand Tutor's daughter to secure a renowned mentor for Pei Wenyuan, which allowed his essay to stand out in the imperial examinations. But in this life, what does he mean to me? Why should I pave the way for him? I gently brushed her hand aside, my tone distant. Sister, you jest. Miss Wang and I are merely casual acquaintances. I truly cannot help with this. Your husband's future prospects, you'd best seek other avenues. The smile on Lu Zhengxi's face froze instantly. Eldest sister, you simply don't want to help, do you? Her voice rose, laced with venom. You're afraid that once Pei Lang passes the exams, they'll live better than you and outshine you. Watching her face contort with jealousy, I found it laughable. Little sister, I am now the matriarch of the Regent Prince's household. Do I really need to be jealous of a wife of a mere candidate for the provincial exams? My half-sister was no pushover. She snorted derisively. Sister, so what if you're in the limelight today, without a child to your name? Won't all this immense wealth eventually fall into the hands of our collateral relatives? She smugly ran her hand over her flat stomach. Pei Lang and I are different. We're in good health, and will have good news soon. I lowered my gaze, letting my eyes drift casually over my own abdomen. Given my fertility, the rumors that Gu Yanzhou was childless would likely be dispelled before long. Seeing my half-sister's stubborn obstinacy, my parents quickly signaled a servant to pull her away, then warmly invited Gu Yanzhou and me to take our seats. As the feast progressed, my half-sister repeatedly tried to bring up the topic of drawing funds from our maternal family to support Pei Wenyuan's career, but my father calmly cut her off each time, though both were sons-in-law. My parents' hearts and eyes were entirely focused on Gu Yanzhou. Pei Wenyuan felt like an awkward afterthought, enduring the homecoming banquet without tasting a single bite. When it was time to leave, he didn't even look back, simply walked straight out, completely forgetting to wait for his wife behind him. Time flies. 3 months passed in the blink of an eye. I took some men to the estate to settle accounts and happened to arrive just as the spring examination results were being announced. My younger half-sister stood on the outskirts of the crowd, tiptoeing to get a better view. When she saw me, her face betrayed unmasked anticipation and pride. Big sister, just you wait and see. Though Pei Lang hasn't received guidance from the grand tutor, with his genuine talent and learning, he's as good as certain to win the top prize. As for me, they'll soon be the glorious wife of the top scholar. Before she could finish speaking, a burst of unsparing laughter erupted around us. An acquaintance who had passed the provincial exams shook his head, his tone tinged with regret yet hiding a touch of schadenfreude. Madam Pei, Brother Pei's literary talent and knowledge are indeed passable, but to call him top tier, he's simply not quite up to par. Forget the top prize, he didn't even make it into the second tier. He barely scraped into the third tier as the very last of the successful candidates. These words struck like a bolt from the blue. Not only did my younger half-sister freeze in shock, but I, too, was secretly taken aback, given Pei Wenyuan's past academic foundation. Even without Grand Tutor Wang's guidance, securing a mid-tier position in the second class would not have been difficult. How could he have fallen to the very bottom of the third class? My younger half-sister could not believe this reality. She pushed her way into the crowd like a madwoman. Impossible. You're lying. Even if my Pei Lang isn't the top scholar, he's at least a third-place scholar. Seeing the crowd jostling violently, Chun Tao, fearing they might bump into me, hurriedly shielded me as we retreated. Madam, it's too chaotic here. Let me help you back to the carriage to rest for a moment. Lately, I've indeed been unusually sleepy and weak, and I've felt a slight swelling in my lower abdomen from time to time, drawing on my experience with pregnancy from my previous life. I was already 7 or 8 parts certain. I just needed to return to the mansion and have the court physician take my pulse, so I could give Gu Yanzhou and my mother-in-law a pleasant surprise. Just as I was about to turn and step into the carriage, a shrill, piercing shout of anger came from behind me. Pei Wenyuan, you good-for-nothing waste. I've fed you well and provided for your education, spending gold and silver like water, and this is the disgraceful ranking you bring back. I must have been blinded by lard back then to let that embroidered ball land on a good-for-nothing like you. Several familiar ladies hurried forward to placate her. Lady Pei, please calm down. It was no small feat for Scholar Pei to pass the exams. So many others failed. You mustn't be too hard on him. Yes. Once Scholar Pei is appointed to a post, you'll be a proper official's wife. The good days are yet to come. Pfft. Stop spouting such hollow platitudes. The younger half-sister spat in frustration, her resentment unchecked. The very bottom of the third class, what kind of decent post could that possibly be? I'll either be exiled to some godforsaken wasteland or a dead government office. I'm not going to follow him to some backwater to suffer and endure hardship. Enough. Shut your mouth. Pei Wenyuan, who had been holding back all along, finally snapped. Forgetting all pretense of a scholar's dignity, he shouted harshly in the middle of the street. If it weren't for you, forcing all those haphazard folk remedies and tonics down my throat day after day, making me anxious before the exam and suffering excruciating stomach pains during it, causing me to perform poorly, I'd say I've had 8 lifetimes of bad luck just to marry a jinx like you. Lu Zhenshui had brought a substantial dowry into the Pei household and had always ruled the roost there, with Pei Wenyuan and his mother often turning a blind eye to her behavior. Now, seeing him dare to talk back to her in public and even blame her for his failure to pass the exams, how could she possibly tolerate such an insult? With a shriek, she threw caution to the wind and lunged at him, clawing and scratching. In their past lives, this pair of unlucky lovebirds had loved each other so deeply they were willing to defy convention. Now that they were truly husband and wife, all that remained was a mess and mutual resentment. The scene was utterly ironic. I shook my head, unwilling to watch this farce any longer, and turned to leave. But suddenly, a terrified scream erupted from the crowd. Oh no! Someone's been killed. I turned to look and saw, amidst the chaos, Pei Wenyuan being shoved violently by Lu Zhenxue. He stumbled, and the back of his head struck a protruding cobblestone by the roadside with a thud. Blood gushed out instantly, and he fell silent. My half-sister was terrified out of her wits and stood frozen in place. I couldn't let this fool cause a death in public and bring disgrace upon the Lu family. I immediately ordered the guards accompanying me, quickly, lift him up and take him to the nearest clinic. Inside the clinic, after an examination, it was fortunately determined that Pei Wenyuan had only suffered a scalp laceration and was not in mortal danger. He soon drifted back to consciousness. His dazed gaze swept over his half-sister, who stood by the bed weeping bitterly with a face full of remorse. Finally, that gaze settled directly on me, its expression complex and indecipherable. That gaze was no longer the aloofness or resentment of before, but a mixture of deep remorse and world-weariness. His lips trembled, his voice hoarse, yet the name he uttered sent a sudden pang through my heart. Tanger. I know I was utterly wrong. Can you give me another chance? That abrupt Tanger, that gaze and tone so utterly different from before, I understood instantly. He had returned with his memories as well. A surge of anger welled up within me, and I snapped harshly. How dare you? Do you presume to call me Tanger? Scholar Pei. You should address me as Lady Gu. Pei Wenyuan trembled all over. His lips quivered as he hurriedly bowed his head. Yes, Lady Gu. Please forgive me. I spoke out of turn. I was momentarily bewildered. With a cold expression, I motioned for Chuntao to leave this filthy place. Unexpectedly, Lu Zhenxue lunged forward, clutching my arm tightly, and shrieked accusingly. Sister, don't leave. Speak clearly, though you still harbor feelings for Pei Wenyuan. Otherwise, why would he address you that way? Smack! The crisp sound of a slap rang out suddenly. I whipped my hand back and struck her face with such force that my palm went numb. Looking at her instantly swollen cheek and her expression of disbelief, my voice was as cold as ice. Lu Zhenxue dared to utter such filthy slander to ruin my reputation again. And it won't end with just a slap. Having been raised by my mother since childhood, I learned far more than just bookkeeping and household management. I am also well versed in the ruthless tactics of the inner courtyard. Back then, she was merely a concubine's daughter. Her petty squabbles were harmless, and I couldn't be bothered to take her seriously. But now, daring to slander me in public, she's asking for trouble. My half-sister covered her face. The stinging pain finally made her feel fear, and her voice trembled with tears. Elder sister, I was wrong. I spoke without thinking. I turned away without another glance and started to leave. Perhaps because I struck her with full force, or perhaps because the rage had overwhelmed me. Everything suddenly went black before my eyes. Just before I lost consciousness, I heard Chuntao's startled cry. When I came to, Gu Yanzhou was holding my hand tightly. His usually composed eyes were now brimming with uncontrollable joy. Seeing that I had woken, he immediately leaned down. My wife, you're awake. We're having a child. I'm going to be a father. This regent prince, who remained unfazed even when a mountain crumbled before him, was now as delighted as a child tasting candy for the first time. Everyone in the clinic rushed forward to offer their congratulations, except for Lu Zhenxue, who stared intently at my belly. Impossible. Absolutely impossible. Everyone in the capital knows my brother-in-law is infertile. How could you be pregnant, sister, unless this child isn't his at all? Hearing Lu Zhenxue slander my good name, Gu Yanzhou immediately ordered his men to force her to her knees. How dare you, to slander this prince's wife? Strike her across the face. After 20 slaps, Lu Zhengxu's once pure and beautiful face had swollen into a pig's head. Gu Yanzhou's gaze flashed like lightning as he swept it over the crowd, each with a different expression. hesitating to speak before finally settling on the chief physician. It seems it is time to dispel some rumors. You speak. The chief physician hurriedly replied. Yes, Your Highness. In truth, everyone has misunderstood. The prince merely struggles to conceive. He is by no means infertile. As for Lady Gu, she possesses a rare, deeply blessed constitution that makes conception exceptionally easy. It is only through their union that we have been blessed with this divine son. Upon hearing this, expressions of sudden realization spread across the crowd's faces, and they nodded in agreement. Lu Zhenxue, her face swollen like a pig's, remained unwilling to accept this. Struggling, she screamed, I don't believe it. My constitution is 100 times stronger than hers. If she can conceive, how could I not? Doctor, take my pulse right now. The old doctor looked at me questioningly. Seeing me nod slightly, he stepped forward and placed his hand on Lu Zhengshu's wrist. Everyone held their breath, watching as the old doctor's brow furrowed deeper and deeper. Lu Zhenxue asked urgently, Am I carrying twins? My pulse must be very strong, right? The senior physician sighed helplessly and withdrew his hand. Madam Pei, you are not pregnant. Moreover, judging by your pulse, your constitution tends toward coldness, and your womb is deficient and cold. It is likely that conceiving will be difficult for you. Lu Zhenxue was struck as if by lightning. Her face instantly turned as white as paper. Ever since childhood, she had secretly compared herself to her elder sister. Now, while her sister had been blessed with a miraculous pregnancy, she herself had been declared unlikely to conceive. This was more agonizing than death itself. That can't be right. It can't be my fault. Take his pulse too. Lu Zhenxue abruptly pointed at Pei Wenyuan, yanking his arm without a word and roughly shoving him toward the senior physician. Pei Wenyuan's face turned ashen. A wave of intense unease and resistance surged within him. Yet Lu Zhenxue held him down with all her might. The senior physician had no choice but to take his pulse once more. A moment later, he looked up at Pei Wenyuan with a hint of pity in his eyes. Scholar Pei, you too exhibit signs of unstable vital energy and deficient kidney qi. Likewise, conceiving children will be quite difficult for you. Pei Wenyuan instinctively opened his mouth to protest. That's impossible. In my previous life, I clearly had 5 sons and 5 daughters. Only after speaking did he realize his mistake. In his previous life, the sole reason Head been able to have so many children was because Head married Lu Qingtang. But in this life, Head married Lu Zhenxue. Forget having many children, even leaving an heir seemed like a luxury. A profound sense of absurdity and regret gnawed at his heart like venomous snakes. Before his death, he had even uttered the outrageous words demanding Qingtang step aside so he could have a child with Lu Zhenxue. How utterly foolish he had been. It turned out that without Lu Qingtang, he, Pei Wenyuan, was the one destined to die without an heir. Back then, he had even harbored a secret grudge against Qingtang because his colleagues teased him about being obsessed with women and having a brood of children. Looking back now, those words had clearly concealed naked envy and jealousy. Gu Yanzhou watched the two of them with their sour expressions, a hint of sarcasm curling at the corners of his lips. He said no more, carefully picking me up in his arms, and walked straight out. Inside the Regent's mansion, upon hearing the good news, my mother-in-law was so overjoyed she could hardly contain herself. Tanger, my dear child, what would you like to eat? Something sour, something sweet. I'll cook it for you myself. She circled around me incessantly, then shot a disdainful glare at Gu Yanzhou, who stood stiffly nearby, wanting to approach but too afraid to do so. What are you still standing there for? Hurry up and find the court physician to learn how to properly care for a pregnant woman. If my daughter-in-law and precious golden grandson suffer even the slightest mishap, just wait and see how I deal with you. Gu Yanzhou rubbed his nose helplessly, both amused and exasperated by his mother's forgetting her son once she has a daughter-in-law attitude, and could only reply, yes, 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 your son will go learn right away. Father and mother also rushed to the Wang mansion upon hearing the news. Upon learning what had happened at the clinic, especially that Lu Zhenxue had publicly slandered my good name, the two elders were both shocked and enraged, their hearts completely broken. As a member of the Lu family, she could be so vicious. We, the Lu family, cannot afford to have such a daughter with a corrupt heart. My father was heartbroken and made a decisive decision on the spot. Publish a notice immediately, severing all ties with Lu Zhenxue and expelling her from the family. From now on, her actions will have no connection whatsoever with the Lu family, lest we be dragged down by her. 2 months later, the family physician took my pulse again and announced with delight that I was carrying twins. My mother was both overjoyed and worried. So she packed her bags and moved into the prince's mansion to care for me alongside her mother-in-law. I knew full well that Gu Yanzhou had made many enemies. To ensure the safety of the children in my womb, I settled into the mansion to rest quietly, rarely setting foot outside. The days of nurturing my pregnancy were peaceful, yet inevitably dull. Chen Tao would often tell me stories of the outside world to lift my spirits. Madam, ever since the second young lady was expelled from the Lu household, Lady Pei has shown her true colors. Not only did she call her a hen that couldn't lay eggs, but she's also been making arrangements for Scholar Pei to take a concubine and expand his family line. Upon hearing this, I merely shook my head indifferently. Human hearts are fickle. Once satisfied with one thing, they crave another. What one cannot have forever stirs the soul, while what one has obtained is cast aside like a worn-out shoe. Another 6 months passed. My belly had grown high and round, making it increasingly difficult to move about. And the time of delivery was fast approaching. On the surface, the capital seemed calm and peaceful, but Gu Yanzhou confided in me that the forces lying in wait were nearly beyond containment. To be on the safe side, I asked my parents to move into the Regent's mansion as well, bringing with them the important ledgers and the keys to the treasury. With the secret guards Gu Yanzhou had carefully arranged to protect us, this place was safe for the time being. Late one night, a sudden blaze of light lit up the area outside the mansion, and the main gate was pounded upon. A deliberately high-pitched male voice pierced the silence, sounding a bit faintly anxious from outside the door. Sister-in-law, open the door. It's your cousin, Gu Yanting. I've come on my elder brother's orders to protect you. This is an emergency. Open the door quickly. Do not open the door. Proceed according to my previous instructions. I gave the order to the mansion's guards and stewards with unwavering resolve, my voice steady and unflappable in the face of danger. The man outside was undoubtedly Gu Yanting, but with my memories from a past life, I knew full well that the so-called cousin had long coveted Gu Yan's immense power and influence, constantly scheming to take his place. Most of the slanderous rumors tarnishing Gu Yan's reputation originated from him. Under no circumstances could I open this door. Seeing that I had no intention of opening the door, the man outside instead noticed that the top of the towering wall was densely studded with sharp shards of glazed roof tiles. From within the wall, heavy stones were being hurled out with a whistling sound, their force astonishing. A direct assault would clearly come at a tremendous cost. Seeing that his ruse had been exposed, Gu Yanting tore off his disguise. Lu Qingtang, your half-sister and her husband's entire family are in my hands. If you don't open the door, they'll lose their lives. Lu Zhenxue joined in with a wail. Big sister, father, mother, it's Zhenxue. Open the door quickly, or he really will kill us. Concubine Lin also wailed at the top of her lungs. Master, a night of marriage brings 100 days of gratitude. I have served you for so many years. Even if I have no merits, I have at least endured hardships. You must save me and our Shuer. Father stood inside the door, his face ashen, and shouted harshly at the door, his voice without a trace of wavering. Lu Zhenxue, the moment you publicly slandered my legitimate elder sister and sought to ruin her reputation, I severed all ties with you. Whether you live or die now has nothing to do with the Lu family. Father, elder sister, I truly know I was wrong. Please, give me one more chance. Lu Zhengshu's voice was filled with despair. Madame Gu, Mind your own business. You must not open the door. Pei Wenyuan's voice rang out immediately afterward. Laced with resolve. His ill-timed advice instantly enraged Gu Yanting. The muffled sounds of fists and feet striking flesh, along with Pei Wenyuan's stifled groans of pain, echoed from outside the door. I silently calculated the time in my mind. The distress signal had already been sent. I only needed to stall them for another 15 minutes. I sat firmly in the armchair Chen Tao had brought over, and through the heavy door, my voice carried clearly. Gu Yanting, your schemes are in vain. The Prince of N, your master, is destined for utter defeat. If you pull back from the brink now and release these innocent people, perhaps His Majesty might spare your life. In my previous life, Prince N had also plotted rebellion, only to be crushed by Gu Yan's decisive crackdown. But this life is different. I married Gu Yanzhou and bore him children, seeing that his hopes of inheriting the regent's mansion were utterly dashed. Gu Yanting, like a cornered rat, resorted to desperate measures and colluded with Prince N. Gu Yanting hadn't expected me to know so much. He couldn't help but feel a twinge of fear. Lu Qingtang, Gu Yanzhou must truly trust you to have confided even such secrets to you. No, Gu Yanzhou did not tell me this. On the contrary, it was I who, relying on my memories from my past life, warned him and His Majesty early on, allowing them to make their plans with composure and minimize the damage. Gu Yanting, if you turn back now, there is still a glimmer of hope. If you persist in your folly, there is only a path to death. I warned him once more. Just then, the sound of horse hooves, rumbling like distant thunder, grew louder as it approached. My tense nerves suddenly relaxed. Reinforcements had finally arrived. Chaos erupted outside the door in an instant. The clanging of clashing blades, battle cries, and agonized screams intertwined. Moments later, the clamor of battle subsided. A familiar, steady voice, carrying a soothing power, penetrated the door. My lady, the bandits have been slain. It is safe now. Open the door. The door slowly swung open. Outside, the light of torches illuminated a figure clad in heavy black armor, standing like a god of war. He was covered in blood, yet his reassuring dignity remained undiminished. Watching him stride toward me, my eyes grew hot, and the tears I had been holding back nearly spilled over. He crossed the room in a few strides, the chill from his armor still lingering. His gaze swept anxiously over me. My dear, were you and the child frightened? Do you feel any discomfort? Just as I was about to shake my head, a sudden, excruciating, unbearable pain surged through my abdomen. I grabbed his arm, my voice trembling. Husband, I think I'm going into labor. In the delivery room, contractions surged like a raging tide. Ignoring the midwife's repeated pleas, Gu Yanzhou insisted on staying in the delivery room. He held my hand tightly, constantly wiping the cold sweat pouring down my forehead. His usually composed face was etched with anxiety and concern, and he was even more tense than I was. 3 full hours of agony seemed to have drained every ounce of my strength. Finally, too loud, vibrant cries rang out in succession, like the music of the heavens, dispelling the tense atmosphere. Outside the delivery room, Pei Wenyuan, who had been standing in silence, swayed almost imperceptibly upon hearing the news that mother and child are safe. He cast one last, deep glance toward the closed delivery room. Emotions churned in his eyes, eventually settling into a quiet sense of resignation. He turned and slipped silently into the night. After the child's first month, Chen Tao told me while playing with the young master, Madam, Magistrate Pei has already set off for that remote post. Lu Zhenxue refused to go with him at all costs and demanded a divorce decree. I hear she took what little remained of her dowry and married the husband master once arranged for her, the young master of the Drunken Spring Pavilion. Only is time. She's there as a concubine. I sighed silently. In my past life, I paved the way for them, allowing them the leisure and romance to entwine their hearts. In this life, trapped by the mundane concerns of daily life. They have ultimately parted ways. Now, as soon as Gu Yanzhou finished his court duties, he would come to see the three of us, me and our 2 children. He would often hold one baby in each arm, rocking them clumsily yet tenderly, his eyes brimming with unadulterated happiness. My dear, you've worked so hard. Thank you for giving me a home and for giving me children who share my blood. I looked back at him, my smile warm and content. Thank you, too, for always protecting us. Prince and Gu Yanting and their followers have all been brought to justice. The dark cloud hanging over our heads has completely dissipated, when His Majesty bestowed rewards for merit. He even granted me the title of Lady Protector of the Realm. The days ahead will only be happier. The story has come to an end. Welcome everyone to subscribe to this channel. Thank you.